Hi, welcome to my YouTube channel, Torture History. Let's discuss the Rome's most sadistic emperors, who was infamous for using red-hot iron instruments. In Roman history, several emperors became infamous for extreme cruelty, but the one most often linked with the use of red-hot iron instruments for torture is Emperor Nero, 54–68 CE. Other sadistic emperors are Caligula, 37–41 CE, known for sadism, ordering executions for amusement, and forcing parents to watch their children die. Commodus, 180–192 CE, took pleasure in killing cripples and slaves in the arena. Domitian, 81–96 CE, ruled by terror, using torture and execution freely against senators and opponents. Caracalla, 198–217 CE, ordered massacres and delighted in cruelty. Nero, the Roman emperor whose name still echoes with fire and fear. He wasn't just cruel, he turned pain into performance. And his favorite tools? Red-hot irons. In 64 CE, a great fire swept through Rome. To silence rumors that he started it, Nero found scapegoats, the Christians. Their punishment would become legend. Ancient writers tell us, victims were branded, seared, and mutilated with glowing iron plates. Others were burned alive or turned into human torches to light Nero's gardens. Why so cruel? This wasn't madness alone, it was politics. Fear kept rivals silent, and spectacle bound the crowd to the emperor's power. Tacitus, they served as torches to light the night. Suetonius, some tortured with heated plates of iron. Cassius Dio, seared with hot irons. Beyond Christians, Nero's cruelty didn't stop with Christians. Slaves, senators, even family members fell victim when suspicion struck. But terror has limits. In 68 CE, abandoned by his army, condemned by the Senate, Nero ended his life. Rome rejoiced. Next, let's discuss about Caligula, the emperor who turned Rome into his playground of terror. Ancient writers say he executed people for fun, forced parents to watch their children die, and even fed prisoners to wild beasts just to amuse himself. Madness or method? He declared himself a living god, ordered temples to display his statue, and demanded worship. Cruelty in power. Senators lived in fear. One wrong word, one wrong glance, death. Suetonius, he delighted in the blood of men. Cassius Dio, he reveled in cruelty. But cruelty breeds enemies. In 41 CE, Caligula was assassinated by his own guards. To this day, his name means excess, madness, and merciless power. Caligula, Rome's mad emperor. He forced parents to watch their children executed, fed prisoners to beasts, and declared himself a god. But terror turned against him. In 41 CE, assassins struck, ending his bloody reign. Domitian, an emperor who ruled by fear, trials, and torture. He staged treason trials, executed senators, and filled Rome with spies. Sadistic punishments. Sources claim he used torture freely, iron instruments, beatings, and public humiliations, to root out dissent. Even his closest advisors lived in terror. He distrusted everyone. Suetonius, he delighted in the blood of the nobility. Cassius Dio, Rome lived in fear. In 96 CE, conspirators assassinated Domitian in his own palace. Historians branded him a tyrant, erasing his name from monuments. A memory Rome tried to destroy. Domitian, Rome's paranoid tyrant. He executed senators, staged treason trials, and used torture to crush dissent. But in 96 CE, fear turned on him. Assassinated in his own palace, his name condemned to oblivion. Next, let's discuss Commodus, the emperor who thought he was Hercules reborn. He loved fighting in the arena, slaughtering animals and cripples for sport. He renamed months after himself and demanded worship as a god. Ancient accounts say he took pleasure in killing helpless victims in staged fights. Herodian, he delighted in bloodshed. Cassius Dio, Rome suffered under his games. But cruelty and madness bred conspiracies. In 192 CE, Commodus was strangled by a wrestler. He was remembered as the emperor who turned Rome into a circus of blood. Commodus, Rome's gladiator emperor. He fought in the arena, slaughtered cripples for fun, and declared himself Hercules reborn. But in 192 CE, conspirators struck. Strangled in his bath, his bloody games ended forever. Although Roman Emperor Nero was accused of sadistic acts, the claim that he used red-hot iron instruments is directly associated with Emperor Domitian. Ancient accounts describe Domitian as a ruthless and cruel tyrant who enjoyed torturing people personally. Domitian's cruelty with red-hot irons. Targeting rivals. To intimidate his enemies in the Senate, Domitian reportedly had their private parts seared with a flaming torch. Executing Vestal virgins. Domitian conducted a campaign against the Vestal virgins, charging them with immorality. After he had the high priestess, Cornelia, buried alive, he reportedly had her alleged lovers beaten to death with scourges. Sadistic games. According to historical sources, Domitian would command slaves to hold out their fingers spread apart on a wooden board. He would then shoot arrows between their fingers. Caligula's reign got off to a promising start. He recalled to Rome many of those who'd been exiled by Tiberius, scrapped an unpopular tax, and built temples, harbors, and aqueducts. But it was about 6 months into his time as emperor, at the age of 25, that his imperial reign of terror began. Caligula was ruthless, sadistic, and extravagant. He was said to treat his horse better than any of his subjects. The beast lived in a white marble stable and fed from an ivory manger. He was rumored to tour the city at night with his guards, indulging in wild orgies with prostitutes before burning down their brothels as his party left. On one occasion, a bored crowd at the circus booed Caligula. Big mistake. Those who led the chorus of jeers had their tongues cut out and were thrown into the arena to be torn to shreds by wild animals. Caligula then regularly emptied the city's overcrowded jails and had the prisoners fed to the show's animals. Possibly what reviled the people of Rome most in Caligula's reign were the mandatory orgies at the imperial palace. The steep entrance fee was then used to finance the emperor's extravagances and wars. He commanded that the highest citizens of Rome should turn up, pay to get in and bring their wives, daughters, and sisters with them, who would all be forced to join in. Caligula was assassinated by several of his bodyguards at the age of 28. Emperor at 17, Nero was described by some as a generous ruler during the first 5 years of his tenure. He lowered taxes, allowed slaves to file complaints about their masters, and was a patron of the arts. But Nero's benign rule didn't last long. After the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD, in which Nero was famously said to have played his lyre while watching the city burn, he ramped up the murderous persecution of Christians. Members of the young religion were tortured, killed in the arenas, beheaded, boiled in oil or water, crucified, and made into human torches. Not much of a family man, Nero tried to murder his mother by sending her away in a galley he'd had specially made. The booby-trapped ship would collapse and sink with the removal of a couple of bolts. Most of the passengers drowned, but Nero's mum secretly made it to shore and escaped. Nero found out and sent a slave to finish her off. The Roman people eventually tired of Nero's murderous ways and sentenced him to be whipped to death. However, he managed to avoid this grim sentence by taking the slightly better option of cutting his own throat. Caligula was a cruel ruler known for lavish spending and being the first emperor assassinated. Nero is infamous for blaming Christians for Rome's fire and taxing heavily for personal gain. Commodus saw himself as Hercules, disgraced his regal status, and was assassinated for his failings. Selecting the top 5 worst Roman emperors of all time isn't a difficult task, thanks to myriad Roman historians, historical fiction, documentaries, and even movies and television programs, all of which illustrate the moral excesses of many of the rulers of Rome and its colonies. From Caligula to the lesser-known but no less notorious Elagabalus, these emperors have left their mark on history. Modern politicians receive a lot of criticism from the public. But despite how lackluster our own leaders can be, there are many historical figures who were much worse. Back in the days of ancient Rome, there were plenty of evil emperors who abused their power. Rather than looking after their citizens, they developed an unquenchable taste for violence, pleasure, and tyranny. And 2,000 years later, their reigns are still a notorious part of our history.